Art begins with abstract decoration, with purely imaginative and pleasurable work dealing with what is unreal and non existent. This is the first stage. Then life becomes fascinated with this new wonder and asks to be admitted into the charmed circle. Art takes life as part of her rough material, recreates it, and refashions it in fresh forms, is absolutely indifferent to fact, invents, imagines, dreams, and keeps between herself and reality the impenetrable barrier of beautiful style, of decorative or ideal treatment. The third stage is when life gets the upper hand and drives art out into the wilderness. This is the true decadence, and it is from this that we are now suffering. Take the case of the English drama. At first, in the hands of the monks, dramatic art was abstract, decorative, and mythological. Then she enlisted life in her service. Using some of life's external forms, she created an entirely new race of beings, whose sorrows were more terrible than any sorrow man has ever felt, whose joys were keener than lovers' joys, who had the rage of the Titans and the calm of the gods, who had monstrous and marvelous sins, monstrous and marvelous virtues. To them she gave a language different from that of actual use, a language full of resonant music and sweet rhythm, made stately by solemn cadence or made delicate by fanciful rhythm, jeweled with wonderful words and enriched with lofty diction. She clothed her children in strange raiment and gave them masks, and at her bidding the antique world rose from its marble tomb. A new Caesar stalked through the streets of risen Rome, and with purple sail and flute-led oars, another Cleopatra passed up the river to Antioch. Old myth and legend and dream took shape and substance. History was entirely rewritten, and there was hardly one of the dramatists who did not recognize that the object of art is not simple truth, but complex beauty. In this they were perfectly right. Art itself is really a form of exaggeration, and selection, which is the very spirit of art, is nothing more than an intensified mode of overemphasis. But life soon shattered the perfection of the form. Even in Shakespeare we can see the beginning of the end. It shows itself by the gradual breaking up of the blank verse in the later plays, by the predominance given to prose, and by the overimportance assigned to characterization. The passages in Shakespeare, and there are many, where the language is uncouth, vulgar, exaggerated, fantastic, obscene even, are entirely due to life calling for an echo of her own voice, and rejecting the intervention of beautiful style, through which alone should life be suffered to find expression. Shakespeare is not by any means a flawless artist. He is too fond of going directly to life, and borrowing life's natural utterance. He forgets that when art surrenders her imaginative medium, she surrenders everything. Goethe says somewhere, "In der Beschränkung zeigt sich erst der Meister." It is in limitation that the master first reveals himself. It is in working within limits that the master reveals himself, and the limitation, the very condition of any art, is style. However, we need not linger any longer over Shakespeare's realism. The Tempest is the most perfect work of Palinode's. All that we desire to point out was that the magnificent work of the Elizabethan and Jacobean artists contained within itself the seeds of its own dissolution, and that if it drew some of its strength from using life as rough material, it drew all its weaknesses from using life as an artistic method. As the inevitable result of the substitution of an imitative for a creative medium, the surrender of an imaginative form, we have the modern English melodrama. The characters in these plays talk on the stage exactly as they would talk off it. They have neither aspirations nor aspirates. They are taken directly from life, and reproduce its vulgarity down to the smallest detail. They present the gait, manner, costume, and accent of real people. They would pass unnoticed in a third-class railway carriage. And yet, how wearisome the plays are! They do not succeed in producing even that impression of reality at which they aim, and which is their only reason for existing. As a method, realism is a complete failure. What is true about the drama and the novel is no less true about those arts that we call the decorative arts. The whole history of these arts in Europe is the record of the struggle between Orientalism with its frank rejection of imitation, its love of artistic convention, its dislike to the actual representation of any object in nature, and our own imitative spirit. Wherever the former has been paramount, as in Byzantium, Sicily, and Spain, by actual contact, or in the rest of Europe, by the influence of the Crusades, we have had beautiful and imaginative work in which the visible things of life are transmuted into artistic conventions, and the things that life has not are invented and fashioned for her delight. But wherever we have returned to life and nature, our work has always become vulgar, common, and uninteresting. Modern tapestry, with its aerial effects, its elaborate perspective, its broad expanses of waste sky, its faith in the laborious realism, has no beauty whatsoever. The pictorial glass of Germany is absolutely detestable. We're beginning to weave possible carpets in England, but only because we have returned to the method and spirit of the East. Our rugs and carpets of 20 years ago, with their solemn, depressing truths, their inane worship of nature, their sordid reproductions of visible objects, have become even to the Philistine a source of laughter. A cultured Mohammedan once remarked to us, "You Christians are so occupied in misinterpreting the fourth commandment that you have never thought of making an artistic application of the second." He was perfectly right. And the whole truth of the matter is this: the proper school need to learn art is in life. Art is in not life, but art. And now let me read you a passage which seems to me to settle the question very completely. It was not always thus. We need not say anything about the poets, for they, with the unfortunate exception of Mr. Wordsworth, have been really faithful to their high mission, and are universally recognized as being absolutely unreliable. But in the works of Herodotus, who, in spite of the shallow and ungenerous attempts of modern scholiasts to verify his history, may justly be called the father of lies, in the published speeches of Cicero, in the biographies of Suetonius, in Tacitus at his best, in Pliny's Natural History, in Hanno's Periplus, in all the early chronicles, in the lives of the saints, in the Froissart and Sir Thomas Malroy, in the travels of Marco Polo, in Olaus Magnus, and Aldrovandus, and Conrad Lycosthenes, with his magnificent Prodigiorum et Ostentorum Chronicon, in the autobiography of Benvenuto Cellini, in the memoirs of Casanova, in Defoe's History of the Plague, in Boswell's Life of Johnson, in Napoleon's Despatches, and in the works of our own Carlyle, whose French Revolution is one of the most fascinating historical novels ever written. Facts are either kept in their proper subordinate position, or else entirely excluded on the general ground of dullness. Now everything is changed. Facts are not merely finding a footing place in history, but they are usurping the domain of fancy, and have invaded the kingdom of romance. Their chilling touch is over everything. They are vulgarizing mankind, the crude commercialism of America, its materializing spirit, its indifference to the poetical side of things, and its lack of imagination and of high unattainable ideals are entirely due to that country having adopted for its national hero, a man who, according to his own confession, was incapable of telling a lie. And it is not too much to say that the story of George Washington and the cherry tree has done more harm, and in a shorter space of time, than any other moral tale in the whole of literature. My dear boy, I assure you it is the case. And the amusing part of the whole thing is that the story of the cherry tree is an absolute myth. However, you must not think that I am too despondent about the artistic future either of America or of our own country. Listen to this. The same change will take place before this century has drawn to its close, we have no doubt whatsoever. Bored by the tedious and improving conversation of those who have neither the wit to exaggerate nor the genius to romance, tired of the intelligent person whose reminiscences are always based upon memory, whose statements are invariably limited by probability, and who is at any time liable to be corroborated by the merest Philistine who happens to be present. Society sooner or later must return to its lost leader, the cultured and fascinating liar, who he was who first, without ever having gone out to the rude chase, told the wandering caveman at sunset how he had dragged the megatherium from the purple darkness of its jasper cave, or slain the mammoth in a single combat and brought back its gilded tusks. We cannot tell, and not one of our modern anthropologists, for all their much boasted science, has had the ordinary courage to tell us. Whatever was his name or race, he certainly was the true founder of social intercourse. For the aim of the liar is simply to charm, to delight, to give pleasure. He is the very basis of civilized society, and without him, a dinner party, even at the mansions of the great, is as dull as a lecture at the Royal Society, or a debate at the Incorporated Authors, or one of Mr. Brennan's farcical comedies. Nor will he be welcomed by society alone. Art, breaking from the prison house of realism, will run to greet him, and will kiss his false, beautiful lips, knowing that he alone is in possession of the great secret of all her manifestations, the secret that truth is entirely and absolutely a matter of style, while life, poor, probable, uninteresting human life, tired of repeating herself for the benefit of Mr. Herbert Spencer, scientific historians, and the compilers of statistics in general, will follow meekly after him and try to reproduce in her own simple and untutored way some of the marvels of which he talks. No doubt there will always be critics who, like a certain writer in the Saturday Review, will gravely censure the teller of fairy tales for his defective knowledge of natural history, who will measure imaginative work by their own lack of any imaginative faculty, and will hold up their ink-stained hands in horror if some honest gentleman who has never been farther than the yew trees of his own garden pens a fascinating book of travels, like Sir John Mandeville, or like Great Rowley, writes a whole history of the world, without knowing anything whatsoever about his past. To excuse themselves, they will try and shelter under the shield of him who made Prospero the magician, and gave him Caliban and Ariel as his servants, who heard the Tritons blowing their horns round the coral reefs of the enchanted isle, and the fairies singing to each other in a wood near Athens, who led the phantom kings in dim procession across the misty Scottish heath, and hid Hecate in a cave with the weird sisters. They will call upon Shakespeare, they always do, and will quote that hackneyed passage, forgetting that this unfortunate aphorism about art, holding the mirror up to nature, is deliberately said by Hamlet, in order to convince the bystanders of his absolute insanity in all art matters. Another cigarette, please. My dear fellow, whatever you may say, it is merely a dramatic utterance, and no more represents Shakespeare's real views upon art than the speeches of Iago represent his real views upon morals. But let me get to the end of the passage.